Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon, and welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security Confidential. Today, we are honored to welcome back an old friend of the show and my friend, Brian Stoner. Brian and I go back a long ways, back to the days of Computer Associates, but Brian's got an illustrious history in cybersecurity. For those of you who don't remember him from the past episode, he's worked at some of the greatest cybersecurity companies out there, companies like CA, Cylance, which is now BlackBerry, and he was
Fireeye. Yeah,
that's Fireeye. You were also, I believe, at McAfee for a little bit.
I was,
and then Stellar Cyber for a little bit. Now DTEX. So Brian's got a long resume, and it's a very cool one. And he keeps his ear to the ground. Is very knowledgeable. We're glad to have him. Welcome to the show, Brian. Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, Manoj. It's always fun to catch up.
Absolutely. So I guess one place to start off with, since we last talked, you've obviously changed roles, but what was do you see technology trends or things happening here that were the root cause behind this? Something exciting happening in the world of cyber?
Yeah, and actually it goes back to some of the other places that I've worked for because a really good friend of mine, Dee Dee Dayton, who I don't know if you know her personally or not, but she's another big cybersecurity executive. Yeah. And, she's the one who brought me into Fireeye. She's the one who brought me into Cylance. And so she's also the one who kind of recommended me to DTEX when they needed a channel chief. So I was happy to take on the role and really help, DTEX make it to the next level in the cyber industry.
That's fantastic. I don't know Dee Dee personally. I only know her from the couple interactions we had at Cylance back when she was running. I think she was global VP of channels, or
she was. Yep.
Yeah, at one point in time. But that's great to hear. Also, so when you're looking at the channel, I guess before I ask this question, let me just kind of set the context. When I look at the cybersecurity software landscape today, it reminds me of a lot of what the automotive landscape was in the early 1900s in North America. There used to be a time when we had 400 automotive manufacturers in North America. And now we're left with Ford, GM, and Chrysler, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So is this an industry that is overcrowded? Is it ripe for consolidation? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're seeing the consolidation right now, especially with the economy and the VC money starting to dry up a little bit. You're going to start to see a lot more acquisitions, people building out platforms and adding functionality that are complementary to their core product offerings. I think you're seeing a lot of that right now.
So then you come along and you take on a Herculean challenge of taking a small company like DTEX and really expanding its channel programs. How does a company like that differentiate itself? I mean, it seems like a really crowded market space.
Well, so I think at DTEX, we're really fortunate that we have founders who started the company 20 years ago, and they've been evolving the platform for many years. So it's not a 2-year-old startup where we're selling our beta product and fixing it for our customers as we go. Right? I think
nobody ever does that.
Yeah, we've never been there before.
Never.
I think customers are starting to mature to the point, especially larger customers, where they're building insider risk programs, right?
Okay.
And, I think a lot of the breaches that we see in the last 10 years, right? Everybody thought that the SIM was going to help them detect it and DLP was going to stop it, right? And I think, unfortunately, what we're finding out is that DLP has become the bike lock of our industry. And what I mean by that is it keeps the honest people honest. But if somebody's really going to steal your bike, they're going to steal your bike, right? And over the last 10 years, every major breach that we've seen, they've all had DLP. But guess what got stolen? All their customer data, right? So I think DTEX is at a point where the industry is maturing to where they know now that they need something that gives them more insight into the happenings on their endpoints than what they're getting from the current siloed solutions. And they need to be able to look at human behavior as a combined risk versus chasing alerts like we've been doing for the last 20 years.
So get into that a little bit more. So how and what does exactly DTEX do then?
So it's a couple of interesting, things that DTEX has built into their platform.
Okay.
The first really unique thing is that we collect our own telemetry from the endpoint, right? And we've built a really lightweight log forwarder that takes only the security relevant data from every endpoint at the kernel level. So we're not relying on Sysmon or other agents that are doing things on the endpoint. We're really just collecting the relevant security data. And it's only 3 to 5 megs per day, significantly less than if you're pulling Sysmon today.
Okay.
And what we do is we pull that into our platform, we enrich it, we use all sorts of different detection methods. Obviously, machine learning is part of it, but there's a whole series of rules and other things that we've built to recognize over 10,000 different behaviors, right,
Okay.
on the endpoint. And instead of
you're not so just let me stop you real quick. So you're not looking for processes, you're looking for patterns. Is that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And all of those patterns we combine into a risk score for each individual or each device. So now instead of, looking at your device and saying, Manoj is trying to send a spreadsheet somewhere that has data on it, right? A truly malicious insider is going to do some level of reconnaissance, right? They're going to pull down some data from different sources at a higher volume than they normally would. They might combine it into a zip file. They might rename some things to try to obfuscate what they're doing. And then, they might send a few test files out through, Dropbox, or they might send something to their Gmail that looks fairly innocuous. And then they might even, start looking on the web at, how do I get around my DLP solution type of thing, right? But, there are other things that people do that are just, they didn't know they shouldn't be doing it, right? Maybe they're sending things to Dropbox and they're doing it to do their job because email won't let them send files out over a certain size and their customers need to get it, right? So there's other negligent behaviors that you can't confuse with a truly malicious insider. So we look at the combined, group of actions that they're doing in real time and build a risk score based on the user, not on the individual alerts.
So, but now this is the use case of a rogue insider, right? But what about the case where we see the vast majority of entries for ransomware are phishing attacks?
Yep. Compromised machines. It's the same thing.
Compromise, which is not a malicious insider per se. I mean, you clicked on.
It's not, but when you understand the normal behaviors of that user, and it starts doing things that are outside of their normal patterns, that's anomalous. And either they've been compromised or, an attacker's, gotten into their machine and is doing things that they don't normally do. We can detect both.
Okay. Got it. So as far as polymorphism goes of these malware pieces, and where they're changing small incremental bits that are designed to make it different enough that it's not going to get picked up by a SIM or by an EDR agent or by an endpoint agent. Have you guys done testing that in those instances, then you guys will in fact pick it up because it's looking for a pattern of behavior? Or
yeah, we capture everything that happens on the endpoint every 60 seconds. So if that file loads, we're hashing it. we're watching what it does. If it tries to build outbound communication or tries to scan the network or tries to do other things, we recognize those things right away. So we have 5 different kind of detection areas within the risk score that we build. One is those user behaviors, UEBA type detections.
Okay.
We have what we call zero trust DLP,
Okay.
where we're hashing every file. We hash every action every user in the organization takes against those files. We can assign risk based on who created the file, if it's an engineering file, those types of things. And then we track everything the user does with it, right? That's what's missing today is we just try to detect that event when somebody tries to take something out. We don't see everything they do leading up to that, nor do we see everything they do after that. Once an attacker sends that file out encrypted so DLP doesn't see it, they also have to go back and clean up after themselves. Those are other things that we capture that you normally don't capture with other solutions.
Now, is DTEX then going to work in conjunction with the SIM again, where these alerts, if it's picking it up, you are going to put them into your SIM and write rules for
Yeah,
alerts
no,
on?
absolutely. And so one of the things that we do that's really unique is we can create different policies based on the risk score of the user, right? So if somebody's just doing some negligent behaviors, we can send an email to that individual to say, you know what, that's not a sanctioned application. You shouldn't be sending company data through there. Stop doing that, right?
Okay.
But as that user gets riskier, we can start taking things away, right? We can take away their access to certain applications. We can take away access to different processes. We can kick them off the network. We can kick them off of Active Directory. So as they get riskier, right, we'll build a dossier basically on that user, and we can send that to HR, and HR can say, hey, to the manager, we got to go have a conversation with this guy before he starts trying to exfiltrate data, because he's showing all these behaviors that are leading up to that. So we're trying to get left of boom on this one versus trying to play block, the attack type activities. So it'll go into the SOAR. The alert can go into the SIM, but the actions that we take can also be taken through a SOAR,
Okay.
or what we're seeing a lot of, and we have a strategic relationship right now with Splunk. So
Okay.
we have a Splunk app, Splunk Forwarder. They can either just take in the alerts or they can take in all of our data, right? The other big partnership we have is with CrowdStrike.
Okay.
When all of your users went out from beyond the corporate firewall where all of your network detections reside, you lose that visibility. They're not down the hall anymore. You can't go see what they're doing. So what we do is we provide all that context. If, let's say, CrowdStrike fires off an alert that there's some malware that's been downloaded to a browser, we can
Okay.
show everything the users that been doing that led up to that and everything that happened afterwards. And those are all things that CrowdStrike doesn't even capture, right? So it helps give that visibility back to the SOC that they lost when all the users went remote.
Where do you guys fit in that world of EDR, endpoint protection, DLP? Where's DTEX classified?
Yeah, so we actually cover 5 different areas, right? The first one would be user behavior and UEBA.
Okay.
So that kind of area, right? We also have what we call zero trust DLP, where we
Okay.
track everything that happens to files and can interject ourselves wherever necessary. We also have the full MITRE ATT&CK framework built into the tool.
Okay.
And here, another interesting side note is we finished an 8-month bake off with MITRE and against all of our major competitors, and they chose to partner with us. And because the MITRE ATT&CK framework is primarily an external attacker framework, we
Okay.
are jointly developing an insider framework with MITRE that'll be released later this year.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So we've got that, and then we also have a whole forensics module and a risk and compliance module built into the product. So as I mentioned before, we can provide all the context around what's happening with remote users beyond what your EDR is telling you about, vulnerabilities on that, right? So that's kind of where we fit. So, like I mentioned before, we can replace several different traditional agents that would be on an endpoint, and give the customer some performance back on their endpoints. Um, yeah.
One thing that really caught my attention was you said that you can, or you have seen your clients replace Tanium out with you.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at Tanium has a lot of pieces built into it, but it's a lot about, if I oversimplify it, about managing vulnerabilities on the endpoint, where it's
Mm-hmm.
you're getting an asset inventory, you can patch remotely, you can find hidden assets. There's a lot of things going on there. Do you guys have that component technology pieces, or is it just become redundant when
No,
you?
we rely on whatever RMM tool that the customer is using for deployment and all that. So we don't have that functionality built in, but a nice way to think about it is the SOC is managing vulnerabilities. The insider risk team that's being developed right now is focused on users and enforcing policy within the company. So we typically deal with somebody outside of the traditional SOC, either HR or this insider risk group that in a lot of cases kind of is part of that governance, risk, and compliance group in a larger company.
Okay, so that's your main audience. So it's not the CISO's office in particular. A lot of times.
No, a lot of times if there is an insider risk kind of pet project for the CISO, and he brings it in, and 2 years later it's time for the renewal and he's gone, then it's a whole it's a little more difficult to sell the renewal, right? But if it's really integrated into a program, which right now we're working with Deloitte and PwC, who both have very kind of the way they used to have identity and access management practices. They now have insider risk practices that focus on, how do you build policy at HR to, deal with individuals that are doing things that are outside of your policy, right? It's one thing for us to send an alert, but if they're trying to figure out, well, how do we handle this, right? Do we tell the manager? Do we sit down with the manager and the employee? What do we do, right? So that's what our bigger partners are helping our customers with, and then we're providing them the data, right? Because you can't manage what you can't measure. We can help measure a lot of things that traditional tools don't measure because they're so focused on alerts, whereas we're focused on users.
Okay, that's a very good visual demo, if you will. And are there particular sectors, Brian, that are using your technology more than others that have been keen to adopt?
I mean, the obvious, ones are banking, for sure, healthcare. We do a lot with different governments, especially in Australia and the U.S. We do a lot with manufacturing. It really just depends on where there's intellectual property that people really want to protect. And the other thing is a lot of people who build these programs don't want their end users to feel like they're being surveilled. You know, um, I don't think anybody wants to feel like Big Brother is kind of watching over their shoulders. And a lot of the competitors that we have that do screen captures and recordings and things like that, it's very intrusive, and it's very processor heavy on their devices and things like that. So we actually spent a part of our history. The company was headquartered in London when
Okay.
GDPR was kind of coming out, and so we built a whole layer of anonymization in the product so that the SOC or HR can't be biased. We scramble the names and usernames and IP addresses for their computers, and unless you have the right credentials, you can't unscramble it and ascertain who the actual user is. So that prevents IT from, or the SOC from having a particular, focus on certain individuals, right? It's all anonymized. So when the threat score reaches a certain threshold, they surface it to HR, and then HR takes the actions that they've developed, from there. So in that way, and because it's lightweight, users don't even know it's there. So, I think from a user experience perspective, it really helps the customer there as well. So not only do they not feel like they're being surveilled, but their machines are faster and have less issues.
So, and what is your customer profile in terms of size? You've mentioned a lot of really big companies. How small is too small for you guys?
Well, there is no too small. I mean, we do have some, 10-man trading firms that use our software. So it's, it doesn't have to be. But I think what we're starting to see is those Fortune 500s, the people that are building those practices, are starting to now kind of filter down into the Fortune 1000s and below that, depending on the amount of IP that the customer is trying to protect, right? So I think it's going more and more mainstream. I've talked to some service providers that want to start adding insider threat monitoring to their MDR service. So it's starting to filter down a little bit, but we've got some work to do to support multi-tenant customers and things like that. We're working on federation right now, but what we're noticing is that with the bigger SIs, when they're working with a bigger customer, that customer wants to keep all their data separate, right? And so normally what we're doing is just sending alerts into their current infrastructure. So multi-tenancy is not really necessary because people are using the SIM and the SOAR as that single pane of glass anyway.
Okay. So then you guys are not a strong MSSP model. You're more of a VAR channel model. Then is that what your go-to market's going to be?
Yeah, so we do have obviously and we just did a press release on it. We have a new relationship with GuidePoint, which we just
Okay.
announced, and we also do quite a bit with Optiv. So yeah, a lot of the bigger VARs, but like I mentioned before, we're doing a lot with the consulting firms, and we're starting to do more with the global SIs, because this really supports a whole new practice for them that means, another source of recurring dollars for them.
Oh, is the technology requiring a heavy amount of consulting or configuration or?
It doesn't require a heavy amount of it. I think our enablement is like 3 days long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not, this is not a 2-week course that you got to take, right?
No, I'm
Um,
turning back the clock to our old days of CA where our projects were like years. We talk about years. How many
yeah.
years is it going to be?
No, it's fairly simple. And then we also can tune all of our alerts and our risk scores for everything. So something that happens in a nuclear facility is going to have a different weight on different things than what happens in a bank, right? So the platform is completely customizable from that perspective, but a lot of it comes out of the box, and the machine learning takes about a week or two to start training. And then once it gets trained, it continues to train, but you can still change the weights on different things. So it'll keep the data very relevant for the end user.
And you guys are 100% cloud based, or is there an on-prem appliance or something that goes in?
So yeah, our primary go-to-market is cloud.
Okay.
Most of our customers use the cloud, but we do have banking customers who wanted to host it on virtual images within their data center. We also have customers who want us to deploy on their VPC in a particular cloud, and we can support all those options.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's and you guys have been around for 20 years.
Yeah, I would say, we've been really kind of coming into our own the last couple of years. We received some money in a round recently from a lot of the investors in Fireeye. As a matter of fact,
Okay.
4 of the Fireeye original board members are our board members. They see tremendous potential in this technology, and so our CEO Bauman was the chief product officer at Fireeye, and
Okay.
obviously I was at Fireeye for a period of time too. So it's
So
kind of, we're bringing the band back together, so to speak.
that's so then let me ask the question. Where do you see the investments going in cybersecurity? You've done a couple companies at this point. What trends are you seeing out there
Yeah.
within the VC world?
So I think the first trend that we're seeing is the sunsetting of traditional SIMs. The rules based detections, and we're starting to see a lot more of the machine learning based detections. And I think that's a function of the fact that pretty much every sim was never designed to take in the volume of data that we're throwing at it, which is why you see companies like Cribble right now having a lot of success, because they can filter out some of that noise to help
Sure.
try to reduce that amount of data going into the sim. But that's another area where we're kind of helping too, because we take about a tenth of what Sysmon generates. So we can help reduce that at the SIM too, as far as endpoint data. But I think, from there, what we're seeing is even now we're seeing attacks on two-factor authentication, right? Which is kind of fun, because that was the thing that everybody said the last few years. If you just do one thing, two-factor authentication, right? Um, but I think that's where now we're starting to see SASE start to become a lot more popular, because if you can control the access and the device, then it doesn't matter what kind of controls you have in your cloud and things like that, because they can't get there anyway. So I've seen a lot of service providers start to try to migrate toward that. Um, I'm trying to think of some of the other major trends that we're seeing. I think for the last couple of years, the EDR wave has been pretty huge, because once the user is outside of your office, how do you get visibility, right?
Right.
We have a team called our I3 team,
Okay.
and they monitor and do investigations for our customers. And we've seen in the last year, the number of insider investigations has doubled in our customer base.
What
And we
really?
also see an extremely high rate of moonlighting right now.
Oh, but that's not going to stop. I mean,
Yeah.
there was just a recent article in the Wall Street Journal about that these a lot of these remote workforce changes are permanent. No, in fact, it was a McKinsey article that 37% of the workforce they are forecasting to be remote, and
Oh, yeah.
that's going to stay that way.
Well, so I think the thing that we need to be able to monitor for is, who are they moonlighting for, right?
Well,
If they're moonlighting and selling dog food on the side, not as big of a deal. But if they're working for one of your competitors and sharing information,
and you
that's a
know what,
whole other
Brian?
ballgame.
There's a whole that what you just said there opens up a huge can of worms, because
Mm-hmm.
if you look at a lot of the remote, not all of them, but a good chunk of the remote workers are independent contractors as
Mm-hmm.
well. And the IRS definition of an independent contractor is that you're selling your services, similar services, to multiple clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by definition, a lot of that workforce should be working for similar clients, i.e., your competitors.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, a simple case, I look at healthcare. You look at an emergency room doctor. That doctor is probably moonlighting at 3 other emergency rooms across town.
Mm-hmm.
That's standard practice in a lot of places, right? And I'm sure some of those hospital systems in bigger cities are competitive hospital systems as well.
Yeah,
And
I mean, and so when you're hiring people, right? There's another challenge. We've also seen several incidents recently where somebody will get hired, they'll stay for 3 days or a week, hired by a malware group, they'll deploy malware on your production systems and quit. And they basically open all the back doors, right? But they're actually creating identities on LinkedIn, getting these people hired,
oh yeah.
putting them inside the organization. I mean, this is scary stuff, right?
Oh,
Um,
believe me, we're very. What you're saying is very true,
yeah,
and you mentioned LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn better really get smart with this and not go the way of Twitter with bots, right? And these fake profiles and people that are coming in. Yes, they're creating fake profiles, hiring people in. All I would say is that if you're a US citizen and you're doing that to a US company, your chances of wearing orange are very, very, very high.
yeah,
So
it's
think about it.
yeah,
Because the Brian, a lot of these guys that are getting hired in and gals or they, whatever the pronoun we want to use are, they are not savvy technically, right? They're
right,
mules in a lot of cases to do
yeah.
A, B, and C.
Hmm.
And they don't know they don't know the first thing about what they're doing. And but unfortunately, they do a lot of damage. They can.
Yeah. So, definitely some new things for people to look at, right? It's not just, oh, have a better password and, have a button so people can, identify phishing emails. You got to talk to your HR people and really educate them too, right? It's a new world out there. It's crazy. I mean, think of how many people got hired without ever actually meeting someone in person. Everybody got hired over Zoom the last 2 or 3 years,
Sure.
you know?
I I I can believe it. And I don't see that trend just overnight changing. I don't think we're going to go back to that old model. At least that's my personal opinion. I'm wrong about a lot of things. So
Well, so now I think the last trend that I'll kind of leave you with is uh, companies are trying to figure out, how do we measure productivity for our workforce? How do we identify, groups that aren't working together that should be working together? How do we identify what our norms are in our business? So all of the data that we collect from a security perspective can also be used to trend organizations. And we have a module that we just released called Pulse that sits on top of our security product and starts to give insights into, what is the culture like in your company? What are your remote workers doing all day type of
that's
thing.
a very
So
appropriate name.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I think the coming generations will solve this problem. And you know what the thing with cyber is, Brian, that regardless of the number of technologies that come up, we're not going to ever be able to make a company 100% safe. You just
yep.
can't. As long as humans are designing these systems, we're flawed creatures, and imperfection never yields perfection. It's just not possible. Um, but we can make a better bike lock, I guess.
We can. Yes, we can.
So hey, I wanted to give you a couple minutes here to talk about. Are you going to any engagements? Anything you want to go ahead and highlight for us? Any talks, books, appearances, anything going on in your world that you can, charities you're working with, anything you'd like our audience to know about? That's
Yeah, off the top of my head, and I mentioned this last time I was on the show, is I'm really big proponent of what Boise State is doing right now with their Cyberdome program. If anybody wants to, add continuing education and they're already working in a SOC and they want to do IR services or do something different, look at the Boise State program. The things that they're doing there for continuing education, for people who are just getting into the business. Maybe they work at an MSP and they want to work in a SOC. Boise State built a whole SOC that supports local municipalities and schools and people that really can't afford cybersecurity. And, the students get that experience protecting some of the most vulnerable organizations in the state free of charge. It's all supported by grants that the state provided to the university. So the program that they built out there, I highly recommend every time I get a chance.
Can you send us a link to that, and we'll include it in the show notes?
Yeah, and you can just look up Boise State Cyberdome program, and you'll find it in Google too.
Now, did you have a hand in developing that curriculum at all?
Well, I didn't have a hand in developing the curriculum, but while I was at Stellar Cyber, Ed, who runs the program, Ed Vasco, super nice guy. I actually met him at a CGI event. Pelham Row runs those events. Anyway, and this was during COVID, and I just reached out and I said, Ed, I know we can't meet in person, but I'd like to just spend 15 minutes with you to get to know about what you're doing, at Boise State. And it wound up, where we provided the Stellar Cyber software to them because they weren't charging, the end users. We didn't charge them for it. So we just built a mutual relationship. And now that they have graduates coming out of that program, the managed services providers for Stellar Cyber get the benefit of newly minted candidates that are fully up to speed on the platform. So it's been wildly successful, and I'm super glad that I made the time to network with Ed, and that all this came out of it.
That's fantastic, and that's good work. We're shorthanded on people in this sector, so providing a means by which people can get an education is a big deal.
Yeah. And, if you've got kids that are high school age, let them know about this career, right? When my son went into high school, all they told him was, well, you could be a programmer or, a video game designer. And I'm like, there's cybersecurity out there, guys. And I think, if we're not recruiting kids at that younger age, then we're missing a huge opportunity, right? Because the world only needs so many game designers. I'm here to tell you, but we need way more cybersecurity people, right? So if we could get kids interested in earlier on, we have some of the best pay packages in the world in the cybersecurity business. And these kids, never find out about it. So, my thing would be talk to your counselors, talk to your, computer science teachers and say, hey, have you ever thought about, I'll come in and talk about cybersecurity for an hour. Just give the kids an idea of what's out there, and who knows, maybe we'll start recruiting enough people to at least have a fighting chance against the bad guys who seem to be recruiting them, faster than we can.
Yeah. I wish you the best of luck with that. It's a noble cause, Brian.
Yeah. Well, it's something we can all do, right?
Yes, we can.
It's not,
Hey, I try, man. I talk about it all the time to young people.
Nobody listens. My kids never listen to me. I don't know what it is.
Look, being a game designer has much higher cachet value, right? Right? Being a music producer, it's okay. Playing guitar, that has a higher cachet value, right?
Well,
it's
like every kid who plays football in high school is not going to go pro.
That's right.
I hate to break the news to everybody,
Well, yeah, but you got to turn back the clock to when you were 15, 16 years old. Was there anything that you believed that you could not do?
Oh, hey, don't even get me started. I was programming mainframes with punch cards in high school, man. This whole cybersecurity thing didn't exist when I was in high school.
Hey, man. The old green screens. I remember those.
The good old days. Yeah, hub and spoke.
That?
Yep.
That's right, man. That was cloud computing.
It was.
And now we're back. We went to distributed and we came back. So I guess what's old is new again. That adage still holds true. Well, hey, Brian, thank you so much. We appreciate your generous time and look forward to having you back again some point. Don't be a stranger here.
Thanks, Manoj. Absolutely. I'd be super excited to do another show anytime.
Thank you, Brian. Take care.